options are. So that's kind of I think if you want to think of strategies, let's review, we went over the different patterns. Let's also review the strategies that we had here. So number one was to chunk up and find counterexamples, or chunk down and find counterexamples, both in the context of pacing and leading. Okay. Another one was to jump levels with the person. So the person is talking about something concrete, and we go to something more abstract to try and deal with it. Okay. If you're going to chunk up or down, usually the purpose of chunking up or down, I mean, in a way, the purpose of practically all of these maneuvers, whether it's redefining or chunking up or chunking down, is to end with some kind of a counterexample that the person is going to have to resort for themselves. So you notice that as opposed to trying to change the belief for them, I chunk down, chunk up, pace and lead, find a counterexample, and then let the person redecide how to deal with it. So in other words, rather than me telling them, so here's what you should believe at the end, I just say, so here's a counterexample, what do you do with it? So another one was to actually prescribe the problem. Take the problem and go, well, since we can't work around it, since it's reality, let's hold the problem constant and start to vary the contexts. So how could we make use out of this? Number one would be to say, what kind of work would be better for people to do at the end of Friday afternoon when they're ready to let go? Another one would be to say, well, let's let them go, since they're going to do it anyway, and since that's our big motivation is they're going to get paid at noon, we'll make them work all the harder to help them come in an hour early on Friday so they can get their money at noon. And since we're going to be giving them what they want, which is to be paid at noon, they're going to be happy with us because we're responding to their needs, and they'll be all the more motivated to work harder that morning, or to work more that morning or something. We'll make them work through lunch, and then they get the whole afternoon. So that would be another strategy, is prescribing them. Or the other option is to say, great, we don't want people to just work for money working for us anyway. Let's pay them on Monday. If they don't work, we'll fire them. And if otherwise, they'll have to learn how to be motivated by something other than money, and then that's great. We'll solve the problem. So there's some of the strategies. In all cases, I want you to notice, we want to do pacing and leading. Now you can go pacing and leading to a chunk up, to a more abstract level, go pacing and leading to a more concrete, specific level, to an analogy, and then go to a counterexample. So the analogy's purpose is to lead you to, well, this doesn't quite fit with the belief. So either I can go to rats or ships and crews, and captains of the ship, and that kind of thing. What I find, by the way, a lot is that people who are really good at doing sleight of mouth stuff in business, they have a certain set of analogies that they use over and over again, so that you take, and those analogies, kind of like you start with a set of basic analogies, and then what you do is, like sports analogies are real common ones. You have a team of people playing baseball or football or something, or you have rats in a maze, or you can have ships and captains. And then what you do is, as you listen to what the belief is, the limiting belief is, you start actually, while they're talking, fit it into one of these analogies. And that will start, and you find out which one of these analogies gives me the most room to move with this person. Okay, so one of the things I want to offer you is that is a strategy that you might find yourself using. Pick maybe a half a dozen really good analogies for things. And as people tell you what their belief is, start fitting it into those analogies. And then see how that works. So, for example, I know one guy does a little reframe where he says what he does with employees is he has them, instead of putting something like employee, he has them he puts a little, what do they call it, a nameplate that says, Robert Dilt's consultant. So even though they're an employee, he has them take on the role of being a consultant and says, now if you were a consultant to this company, how would you react differently? You wouldn't expect that the company's going to take care of you, pay all of your benefits, do all this stuff. You'd want to work because you know that they'd keep you on and keep paying you if you did your job. And so what he does is, as a real kind of little interesting maneuver, he actually says, you guys aren't really employees, you're consultants to me. Which actually then turns around the employee's point of view on what they're doing. So he could also go to the employee and find out how he would ship it. Let me check the time here. I think it's time to take a morning break here. She goes, no. Well, what I want to do is, we started here by I wanted to start to integrate in through the different kinds of techniques that we use and put them into strategic maneuvers, because what makes them work is the strategy that you use them inside. One of the things I thought we might do, by the way, before we break, is that Denise and I have been talking about some possible ways of doing some of this, understanding some of these sleight of mouth patterns in a non-verbal way. And one of the things that we thought about might be a little fun thing to do during the break or right before the break is in the context of, say, something like charades. When you're trying to do charades and you want somebody to guess the answer to it, you know how sometimes you go whole thing and you do an analogy, and sometimes you go first syllable and you make it sound like the first syllable? Those things would be analogies to chunking down, to going to a consequence. And what I thought you might be interesting to do is to play a little charades game where somebody comes up with something, and what you do is, instead of just doing your typical charades, you have to act it out maybe, but you have to label it. You go, here's the thing I'm thinking of, but this is a consequence to it, and then I act out the consequence, and you try and figure out what it is. And then I go, well, here's a redefine of it. It's not this, but it's like this, and I show what it's like. And I say, here's a small chunk of it, and I show you a small chunk, or here's something that's the whole thing. Okay, so you understand that the idea would be, you could do all of these patterns in a nonverbal way that would also be more kinesthetic for you kinesthetic learners, and also more visual for you visual learners, as to how would I, if I'm playing a charades game, how would I go about using consequence as an element of charades? Because you could do it, and we might as well make sleight of charade.
Being as I'm a visual, would you show me?
Well, yes. Do you want to, shall we?
Yeah. Oh, good. It's like, I mean, you didn't do it myself.
Okay, so let's do it, and what we'll do is just set this up, and then this is something you could do at the, so how would you want to do this? Do you want to be what we could do is, do you want to think of a word and do the acting, or think of a movie, or?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Want me to think of a movie?
Yeah, think of a movie.
Okay.
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 Now, here's what we can do. I haven't thought out the mechanics of it that much. Either I could have her show you a consequence that relates to this, so you have a title.
Yeah.
What I could do is, I could actually request that she and I could work together, and I could actually request that she does something that chunks the whole thing up, or that she does something that chunks part of it up. I think what I more prefer to do is to have you figure out a way that you'd like for them to get it, and then tell us whether it's going to be a small chunk, a consequence. But just like you, rather than doing first syllable, I mean, you can do chunk down and show us first syllable, but I'd like you to categorize what you're going to do in the context of sleight of mouth. And you can ask me.
This is going to act out the title of the...
Okay, so you're going to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So in other words, there's a title of the movie, and I can either go, it has 5 words, and here's the first syllable of the first word. That's chunking down.
Or which word I was going to do first. And
Yeah. So, or you could do the whole title, act out the whole thing.
act out the whole title.
So which were you going to do? Chunk down or
I was
chunk